Hi, I am Dr. Felice Gersh, your integrative OBGYN physician. Well, we're already well into 2026, and I hope that you are actually trying to do the different things that you set up for your resolutions for better health. Well, I'll tell you one of my secrets, and I'm not keeping it a secret. So, what is that? It's utilizing our ability to convert our metabolism through different forms of fasting. Well, for this particular segment, I'm going to focus on one of my favorites, which is the fasting mimicking diet. And I want to say that this particular segment of my Instagram is my own initiative, but I am going to talk about a product that I work with, the company El Nutra, and their product Prolon for promoting longevity, which is the fasting mimicking diet. And I am on their medical advisory board, and I sometimes lecture and educate on the topic for them because I totally believe in it. Well, let me tell you a little background. I think it's interesting. Back in the day, this is quite a few years ago, I got a cold call from someone who had a secret mission. The mission was to find a medical practice that they could work with to test drive, to be the pilot, the beta site for using the very beginning stages of a fasting mimicking diet involving the public. So what happened? I ended up taking this call. I didn't really know that there was a secret mission. It was just a survey. And I thought, oh, this is interesting. I'll take the survey. Well, it turned out that they were looking for that practice and that doctor, and it turned out to be me. So I was taken over to the campus at USC, where I got to meet and have lunch and then tour the laboratories of Dr. Walter Longo, such a famous guy, so deservedly so, who, with his team, developed the fasting mimicking diet. And that day began the beginning of a whole new chapter of my life, really learning and understanding so much that I hadn't learned, certainly nothing in my medical school background, about how the body responds to different types of fasting and different functions in the body, one of which you may have heard of, now it's pretty famous, called autophagy. Well, it turned out that I was selected, my practice was selected to be that beta test site. So myself and my patients got to try the very beginning type of fasting mimicking diet that they were developing. And we got to give feedback not on how it worked from a point of view of autophagy and health, but from a usability standpoint, taste and usability. So we gave feedback and then they evolved and it became a product. They market it now and it's made some different changes over the years. And I have always been a very strong believer in the science of the fasting mimicking diet and utilizing it both for myself, for my healthy longevity, and for my patients. So let's get into it. Like, what the heck is a fasting mimicking diet anyway? It turns out that when you fast for a while, usually close to about 3 days, your body gets into a certain special state when it sort of gives up and says, there's no food coming. Like day 1 into day 2, the body just says, I'll just wait around. Food will probably show up. Something will happen, I'll get food. But by around day 3, the end of day 2 into day 3, the body says, uh-oh, no food is coming. I better do something about it, and pronto. So you need energy, right? Because you've not eaten now for over 2 days. What are you going to do? You're going to start burning fat, okay? Yes, you're going to stop using glucose because there's none coming in. And by then you've used up your stores of glucose called glycogen. That's the storage form of glucose. Well, they're all gone. So you have to start using your other form of energy, stored fat. Well, what's fantastic is at that point, the kind of fat you're going to start burning is the yucky visceral fat, the belly fat, the fat that's invading your organs, like your liver or your pancreas or your bone marrow or your heart, the visceral fat. That's the real dangerous fat, not the fat that's on your butt. That's not so dangerous, okay? It's the fat that's around your belly and the ones that are in your organs that are really pro-inflammatory that can really harm you in so many ways. So you start burning that fat, the bad fat, first. And what happens is you want to then use your muscles because you got to go out there. You got to go find food, or you got to go, find an animal, go hunting. You got to do something because you need food. So you go out and you use your muscles. So you do not want to break down your muscles. You need your muscles. So when you go into this state of autophagy, you're going to start also doing this cellular renewal. I call it spring cleaning of your cells. Because you have no food coming in at that point, what are you going to do? Well, you're going to utilize the cellular structures that already exist, break them down, and then reconstruct them into new, renewed, healthy ones. So that's called autophagy, cellular renewal. And what else are you going to do? Get rid of the old baggage. So you want to kill off the old senescent cells, the ones that are just taking up fuel that you cannot afford to give them. So you're going to start having more programmed self-suicide, apoptosis. Get rid of those old zombie cells. Get rid of the senescent cells, the one that create inflammation throughout your body and harm you. So what's happening now is you're burning fat, you're conserving your lean body mass like your muscle. The fat you want to get rid of is the yucky fat, the visceral fat, the belly fat. That is what you're going to use for fuel. Okay, so you're going to go into ketosis, and that means you're using ketones. That is a breakdown fat product for energy. Now, a lot of people talk about the ketogenic diet. Well, I'm not going to talk about it. That's another day, another topic. But ketosis, the way you're supposed to go into ketosis for the healthy people out there who want to stay healthy, it's not by eating endless fat to go into ketosis. It's by fasting. That's how you're supposed to go into ketosis, by burning fat, not by eating fat. Okay? So you go into the state of ketosis, you're burning visceral fat, you're conserving your lean body mass like muscle. You're then getting rid of the old senescent cells. It's like, get rid of you guys. You're taking a valuable landscape. We can't afford to feed you. So you're going to also need to find food, like I'm talking about. So you have to be smarter. If you're going to survive, and remember, survival is key to reproduction. If you're not alive, you're not going to reproduce. And reproduction is the prime directive of life. So you're now going to have to be smarter. Well, how are you going to be smarter? Because you got to go out there and find that food. Well, you're going to increase things like brain growth factor, brain factors that are going to help your brain to be stronger and smarter, like brain-derived neurotrophic factor, nerve growth factor. So you're going to increase brain function. Okay? Now, what happens when you do this with a fasting mimicking diet? Well, you're much more likely to be successful, for one thing, because I don't know about you, but I really love to eat. So not eating for 4 days in a row would be very hard to do. Just drinking water, no food at all. And doing that multiple months in a row for 4 days, that would be somewhat of the equivalent of doing a fasting mimicking diet for 5 days. Because when you do the fasting mimicking diet, you actually get food. This is the brilliant thing, okay? You get food in such a composition of low glucose, low sugar, and low protein, so that the nutrient sensors that reside in the hypothalamus of your brain don't get turned on and turn on what we call mTOR. It's like flies under the radar. I call it stealth food. It took Dr. Longo and his team a long time to come up with this specially formulated composition of food that would fly under the radar of the nutrient sensors. So you have the same effect, pretty close, the same effect by doing the fasting mimicking diet for 5 days that you would have from eating nothing, just drinking water for 4. And if you're like me and you love eating, going without food for 4 days and just drinking water may not be possible to do. Really and truly, that is a tough thing to do. And maybe you could do it once, but the goal is to do it multiple times. This isn't a one and done kind of a thing. So when you eat food and you get 3 meals a day, that's what the fasting mimicking diet includes. You can even have certain snacks. It all comes prepackaged, day 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's so simple, you follow directions. You don't take any other supplements other than what they provide, and you eat exactly what they give you, and you eat it when they tell you. So you get the food for the first meal, the middle meal, the last meal. And sometimes you could spread it out a little bit. So if you like to have like some of the crackers or something a little different time of the day, and you stay very well hydrated, and they give you all the stuff you need, it really isn't that hard. I can do it. I've done it countless times already. It's part of my healthy longevity program for my, like I said, myself and my patients. Well, let's talk a little bit more. I made a little list here. It helps reduce neuroinflammation. I talked about the brain. Well, who doesn't want to have a really smart brain? I can tell you from my own personal experience, I was doing a lot of medical, legal, forensic expert work. Yes, my dad convinced me. My dad was an attorney, and he said in order to have a really qualified, functional legal system, you have to have really qualified, honest, knowledgeable experts. So I was a forensic medical expert. I was the one that sat there in the witness seat in the courtroom and gave testimony, basically educating the jury about the medical parts and the medical aspects of the case. Well, I remember one time I was set to do a deposition, and the adversarial lawyer, the one on the other side, was taking my deposition. And it just happened that that was the last day of my 5-day prolon, because it's 5 days. I can tell you, I'm being totally honest with you. I felt so smart. I was like so on top of my game. I remembered every single thing about that case. Well, I gave my deposition, and within 2 days, the case settled very favorably for the side that I was working with, because I believed in that side. That's why I decided to be the expert. So the bottom line is, I truly felt it. And I know you would too. I felt my brain just, and I'm not saying that I feel foggy brain the other times, but I felt like, whoa, like my brain was on fire with energy and intelligence and focus. And that's what they've shown in studies, okay? That it really does. And of course, some of these studies have been done what they call preclinical, which is involving things like mice, but they've also done studies in humans. So it's a blend. They've done studies in both rodents and in humans. Now, what about in terms of brain resilience? That's increased. What about the immune system? Well, there's an embedded immune system in the brain, and it involves specialized macrophages called microglia. So when you do the fasting mimicking diet, it can reduce neuroinflammation by keeping these microglia from becoming overly activated and creating an inflammatory state. So that's really important. Now, what else? It's actually been shown to increase neural stem cells. So that's how you can grow and repair your neurons. And when they've done studies in preclinical data, it shows increase in, like I felt myself, in functionality, memory and so forth. Now, what about biological aging? That's really trendy these days. Well, they did a human study, and in that study, using markers of immune cells, that's one of the ratio of different types of immune cells is a marker of biological age. When they did the study using Prolon, they found an improvement in biological age of 2.5 years. Now that's pretty darn good. So I would like to have my brain to be 2.5 years younger just by doing some fasting mimicking dietary work. Now, what about the heart? Well, the heart is also benefited. You can have improvements in vascular health, and the heart becomes more resilient to cardiotoxic kinds of materials that could be circulating. And what about the immune system? I mentioned that it's anti-inflammatory. Well, when they do markers for inflammation, the markers go down. You have an improvement in the total body state of inflammation, like the marker high sensitivity C-reactive protein goes down. Now, what about the studies on cancer? Yes, they have both preclinical and now clinical studies like phase 1 and phase 2 looking at using fasting mimicking diet as an adjunct with chemotherapy. So it turns out that there are special qualities that are very different between our healthy cells and cancer cells. And when you starve with a fasting mimicking diet, or of course you could do water fasting, but that's very hard for people to do, including myself. When you do fasting of either type, then you have different effects in cancer cells and in healthy cells. And it turns out, interestingly, that human healthy cells are more resistant to any kind of changes in their functionality. They have capabilities that cancer cells don't have. For example, the healthy cells can kind of go into sort of like a hibernation kind of a state, and they are not impacted anywhere so much by chemotherapy. So if you do this fasting mimicking or you do water fasting and then someone gets chemotherapy, the chemotherapy becomes safer because it doesn't harm your healthy cells and it is more lethal to the cancer cells. And now they're looking at other different pathways that occur that make chemotherapy more efficacious when you combine it with a fasting mimicking diet. And there's ongoing studies in humans. And because it was successful and showed very good outcome, for example, in melanoma, and these were like phase 1 and 2 trials in humans. Now they can expand to much larger trials in humans. So the potential is incredibly 2 thumbs up for the combination of fasting mimicking diets and combining it with chemotherapy. What have they also shown? That a fasting mimicking diet can be beneficial for the gut. It can improve the gut microbiome. It can improve leaky gut, impaired gut barrier. So these are all really, really important things. It can be very beneficial to the cardiovascular system, to the neurological system, to the immune system, to the gut, the GI system. So this is really what I call amazing data. Now, what about actual tips? Well, as a female, if you're in the reproductive years and you are cycling, you have menstrual cycles, I recommend that you do the fasting mimicking diet during the luteal phase, okay? So, and let me explain why. During the proliferative phase or the first half, the follicular phase, if you do a fasting mimicking diet, the body may say, uh-oh, no food is here. We will either have a poor or no ovulation. So you don't want to do starving, fasting even like for 4 or 5 days. You don't want to do fasting with water or fasting mimicking diet during the first half of the menstrual cycle. You may negatively impact ovulation. There were studies done in the 1990s that showed what? That if you did that, and these were like 2 and 3 day studies, that in certain women, normal weight or thin, they stopped ovulating altogether. So that is not a good thing. And in women who were a little bit heavier, but not obese, okay, they often had a poor ovulation. Now, if you do it in the luteal phase, after ovulation, okay, then you obviously will not impact on ovulation. It's already happened. And what they have found is that doing fasting, now these were studies with 2 to 3 days of water fasting. So I'm making an assumption it would be the same, but I don't have the proof of it with the fasting mimicking diet. But what they showed was that you could increase the health of the autonomic nervous system. You could increase heart rate variability, and it was a calming effect. So it could actually potentially help with PMS, premenstrual syndrome. So do the fasting mimicking diet after ovulation in the second half during the last 2 weeks of the menstrual cycle. What if you're in menopause? In menopause, there really isn't a time that would be shown to be better or worse. So I'm giving this advice, but it's not based on any studies that I am aware of. I would suggest that you do it if you're doing cyclic hormones, like I recommend, where you're doing 2 weeks of progesterone and then 2 weeks without progesterone, that you do the fasting mimicking diet when you're on the progesterone to somewhat mimic a normal menstrual cycle, although I have no published data on that. So if it came down to it, I would say do it whenever you can do it, okay? Because that's the real thing. That's the most important. You don't have to worry about affecting ovulation when you are obviously in menopause because you've ceased ovulating altogether. So how often should you do it? I recommend that if you're incredibly healthy, that you do it for 5 days, the fasting mimicking diet, every month for 3 months in a row, and thereafter do it 3 or 4 times a year. And if you're very young and very healthy, maybe just twice a year. Now, what if you have other issues like you're pre-diabetic or you're somewhat overweight, but you're not too overweight? Then you want to go at least 4 months in a row and then about 4 times a year. Now, what if you're trying to solve some actual definite medical conditions, like you have early stage diabetes, you have pre-diabetes, that's documented, you have abnormal fat in your liver, like metabolic disorders, you have hepatic metabolic steatosis, then you want to do it every month. This is my opinion. This is what I recommend, that you do it every month until you're normalized. Okay. Now, what if you can't do it a month? You're on a vacation. Okay. You're allowed to, if it happens, it happens. But consistency, they've shown, well, maybe you don't know, in studies that you can eliminate about half of the abnormal fat deposits in the liver after 6 months of doing the fasting mimicking diet for 5 days each of those 6 months. And then you continue, and it will also continue to improve and reduce the fat. And it's not easy to get fat out of your liver or other organs. And especially, without pharmaceuticals. And we don't even have definitive pharmaceuticals to actually solve this problem, which is really serious, having fat deposits in the liver. So do it every month until you have resolution of the problem. And you'll see the markers of metabolic dysfunction get better as you go through the months doing the fasting mimicking diet, just 5 days. And then when it comes to refeeding, what happens after the 5 days, the next day you should probably eat, it's all real food, but eat lightly. I usually recommend like maybe a vegetable stir fry or a vegetable soup, just eat lightly and then eat your normal healthy diet. And of course, that's another topic we'll go into, like what is a normal healthy diet? Just think plant focused, lots of different plants and only a little bit of animal protein. Try not to snack and try to eat your dinner early and try to not skip breakfast. That's actually not the best thing for your metabolic health. So fasting mimicking diets I have used to help improve fertility, not while you're actually trying to get pregnant, but in the few months before getting pregnant. And I've had so many successes with pregnancy in women who are really having trouble because it reduces systemic inflammation and is quite rejuvenating to the body. And autophagy, this reduction in old cells and renewal of cells that are viable but can be healthier, is really very important for overall health and healthy longevity and fertility. So this is a tool that almost everyone, and I say almost because there are some people that should not do this. There are people who are extremely underweight, like they have a body mass index of under 18. They're very young. We don't do this in kids, at least 18, okay? And they're not frail, right? We don't want to take people who are elderly and frail, people who have like atrial fibrillation, people who've recently had a serious illness, people who have serious heart disease, or people who are very elderly. We just don't have data, and there's always some potential risk in doing something, especially when you don't have data. I always recommend, since I'm an MD, that you do this in conjunction with medical care, whether it's with an MD or another qualified medical provider, because I believe that it's part of a total body plan, okay, for overall health. And so that I love to do lab tests and follow and have supervision of my patients who are doing a fasting mimicking diet. In terms of success with it, I do recommend that if you are eating a lot of the standard American diet, you're eating a lot of processed food, a lot of sugars, a lot of fast foods, that before you even endeavor to do the fasting mimicking diet, that you take a month or 6 weeks and just stop eating all the processed foods and the high sugar foods and start eating a healthy plant focused diet, and then go into fasting mimicking diet, because you have to have some degree of metabolic flexibility so that when you start going into ketosis and you start burning fat and you create ketones and you stop burning glucose, that you actually can do it and do a seamless, healthy, easy transition, because some people don't have that metabolic flexibility and it's hard for their bodies to convert from burning glucose into burning fat, and they go into a state of feeling like they're starving to death. So don't start this if you are eating like a standard American diet all the time. Take a few weeks, like a month anyway, to just stop eating those foods and start eating real healthy foods, a healthy longevity diet, and then start your fasting mimicking diet. This is your year of healthy choices and health optimization. I hope that you, if you're a candidate, that you will utilize a fasting mimicking diet as part of your therapeutic toolbox to optimize your health.